Well, we have a new case. Just like I said in another video, I'm recording 2 videos with Felipe because Felipe is still growing and he won't stop barking and he won't let me work. But I know he's just a kid, and when he's here with me, he behaves well. So I know you won't have to put up with Felipe because Felipe is the best. But anyway, it's the only way I'm able to work right now.
So for those who don't know him, he's Felipe Ignacio Lando.
Well, before starting this case, I want to talk to my friends from Colombia. I want to start this video by sending you strength and my deepest condolences to those who lost family members in the earthquake that recently struck several cities in this beautiful country, and to everyone affected by this event. Just like I said in another video where I talked about Venezuela, now is the time to help with whatever you can. Okay, if you know about donation centers in your area, leave it in the comments so we can share ways to support Colombia in this difficult time. Today, we're going to talk about a case from this country in a luxury building that was mainly used for Airbnb rentals, also for short-term rentals. And in this luxury building, a body had been found inside a half-open gray suitcase. That apartment in the building called Morph was number 702, and that same morning the woman who rented the place, named Natalia, was supposed to check out. But when a cleaning employee who had to prepare the place for future tenants went to the unit, the door was locked. No one answered. This woman knocked on the door, but no one answered. So, with a master key, she went in. That's when she saw that the apartment was clean and no one was inside, but she could hear the shower running in the bathroom. It was when she entered this bathroom that she saw the gray suitcase, half open, under the running shower. And when she opened the suitcase, she saw the lifeless body of the woman who had rented the place, Natalia Villalba Angarita.
This happened in one of the most exclusive areas of the Colombian capital. We're talking about the Chico neighborhood in Chapinero, in the north of Bogota.
And it's a recent case that happened on June 22, 2026. That's how the cleaner notified her bosses, who immediately called the police, which started this investigation. And the question was, who had killed Natalia? Well, let's continue with this case. Natalia was 36 years old. She was born on October 16, 1989 in the city of Cúcuta, near the border with Venezuela. And she was the oldest of 5 siblings. 17 years ago, she decided to move to Bogota, where she lived until the day she died. Natalia was an important figure in her family because she had taken on the role of a second mother to her siblings. When her friends talked about her, they said she was a cheerful, sociable, intelligent woman and a leader among her peers. Her educational record was impeccable, with excellent grades in school. Then, she studied 2 semesters of telecommunications engineering in her hometown until the whole family moved to Bogota. Then, in that city, she changed her major and graduated with honors as a graphic designer. While she was studying, she worked at a call center to pay for her studies and then became independent, moving out of her family home. After all this, Natalia ventured into modeling and started appearing in catalogs and on magazine covers.
Now let's talk about Henry. He was Natalia's best friend and worked as a taxi driver.
In fact, they met when Natalia moved to Bogota, which was when Henry picked her up in his vehicle as part of his job. In other words, she was a client. During that initial trip, Natalia and Henry had a conversation about her reason for moving to the capital and the dreams she had. Henry said that he saw a reflection of his daughter in Natalia. So he offered to help her find a place to settle, as well as to pick her up and take her wherever she wanted. At the time of the crime, they had already been friends for more than 15 years. During all those years, they both helped each other in different ways. When Henry was busy, for example, Natalia used to look for passengers, and something curious happened here. On one of those trips, Natalia picked up a client named Christina, and after that, after talking during that trip and hitting it off, as people usually say, Christina and Natalia started a friendship that evolved into them becoming best friends. Christina gave her emotional support, and sometimes even financial support.
If things got tough,
Natalia eventually opened her own design company, and her best friend Christina even said that Natalia's real dream was to open a multi-story spa. On the romantic side, Natalia had a few long relationships, also serious ones. But the most significant one was a long-distance relationship with a man named Cameron, who was Australian, whom she met on the internet. They used to meet in Europe, which was like a halfway point for both of them. And that often happens when there's that much distance between them, like between Colombia and Australia. Although everyone saw this relationship as very stable, they ended up separating because Cameron wanted to get married and have children, while Natalia was focused on her career and her businesses.
Natalia traveled a lot. The authorities even tracked her trips to Spain, Panama, and Brazil.
On her last trip to Rio de Janeiro, Natalia was the victim of a robbery. According to reports, her cash and cell phone were stolen. So after that, she had to start using her credit cards to continue the trip because luckily she had left the cards at the hotel.
The problem was that Natalia couldn't handle those debts.
In addition, there was also a record of a motorcycle purchase, and this led the banks to block those cards.
Natalia's idea to get out of this situation was to rent the Airbnb in the Morph building and use it as a temporary office.
So, she would rent an apartment when she had meetings or clients, and by being in such an exclusive place, clients would see potential in working with her. Exactly.
That was the strategy.
Christina was the one who helped her with this. She paid for the apartments with her credit card, with the promise that Natalia would pay her back soon, and the strategy worked.
By June of 2026, Natalia started to be better off financially. She paid her best friend back and was already looking for a new place to live.
Let's go to the last days before her death. The body had been found on June 22nd and on Monday. Monday and Tuesday, June 16th, went by relatively normally. Natalia met with her brother so he could return the motorcycle she had lent him and had lunch with her best friend Christina. Both said, and I'm talking about Christina, her best friend, and also her brother, both said they saw her acting normal and nothing stood out.
On Wednesday, June 17th, Natalia got sick.
Apparently, she started having some stomach and muscle discomfort. So she ordered some medicine for delivery and stayed in to rest. Later, Natalia spoke with her mother. She told her that she wanted to travel to Cucuta to vote in the elections, but her mom told her not to do it so she wouldn't spend more money. Natalia's plan was to travel on the 20th and return to Bogota on the 22nd, but she didn't do it. In the end, she stayed in the capital. They also talked about some American clients that she was about to get, and that was the last time she spoke with her mom. By Thursday, June 18th,
Natalia was feeling better and told this to Christina when she contacted her very early.
Christina wanted to visit her around 11 in the morning, but Natalia told her it would be better at noon because she was busy. In the end, Christina didn't show up at the apartment, and that was the last communication she had with anyone from her circle. After that, friends and family mentioned that they tried to send her messages. They also tried calling her, but there was no answer. Even later, the phone appeared to be turned off.
And that's when those closest to her began to analyze what could have happened.
Maybe her phone had been stolen again, or maybe she finally decided to travel to Cucuta unexpectedly for the elections. That's why, according to the family, they decided to wait and didn't report her disappearance. The mother said that the father would travel to Bogota on Monday to go directly to the apartment in case she didn't show up. And before this happened, the body was found in the Airbnb that Natalia was renting. Well, let's get to the investigation. We already know how the body was found, but there were more things inside this Airbnb. The first thing we can mention is that 3 blunt objects were found in the apartment, which were taken as evidence. We'll talk a bit more about this later because these are important objects.
It was also clear that there was no forced entry at the scene, so either it was someone who had access to the apartment or Natalia had opened the door for them.
At the scene, they found Natalia's clothes and personal documents, but her phone was nowhere to be found. The body also told part of the story and matched the last communication from Natalia 4 days earlier.
The body was stiff, and the autopsy confirmed that it had been dead for days. Possibly since June 18th, which was when family and friends confirmed that Natalia stopped responding.
The good thing about being in a luxury building is that there are a lot of people, so there are cameras everywhere. The authorities had to check the security footage to see if there were any potential suspects. In early June, Natalia had received a visit from a man who had stayed with her for several days. Closer to the date of her death, another man had been seen on the security cameras. In addition, these men were identified as potentially foreigners. And here we're going to talk about something that's part of the case, but that could never be proven. In fact, the family and friends deny that this part of the story was real.
In no way do we want to re-victimize Natalia with this part, but it was something that was investigated at the time and was widely discussed on social media.
Many began to speculate that Natalia, since she was a model, worked as an escort.
It's a connection that people always make, right? Between modeling and this kind of work, but it's not always true.
These men, according to this theory, could have been clients.
Now,
what doesn't fit with this idea is that not long after, the first man seen on security cameras was someone that Natalia met on a trip to Mexico and with whom she had a certain romantic relationship. He was ruled out because after June 7th, he no longer appeared on the security cameras. He was never identified by his full name. I mean, yes, he was identified by the authorities, but his name was never made public. It is only known that he is a US citizen born in Texas. Now, the second man did attract more attention, and as they kept watching the surveillance footage, it became increasingly clear that he had to be the main suspect. On Thursday, June 18, 2026, at 10:33. In the morning, the cameras recorded a heavyset, foreign-looking man entering the building, signing the visitor log at the entrance, and going up to the 7th floor. We're going to talk about all of this. We're also going to talk about the visitor log. So far, it's not known how they met, but many media outlets are talking about dating apps like Tinder and Bumble.
This is because the man we're talking about was constantly seen looking at women on these apps.
Christina, who was Natalia's confidant and best friend, never knew about the presence of this man. She told her everything, but Natalia hadn't mentioned this particular man to her. Do you remember that at one point, Natalia told her mother, in fact, in the last communication they had, that she was about to close a deal with some Americans? To me, it sounds like it could have been this. Nothing about this idea of being an escort sounds coherent, but if we analyze it, she was meeting this man on a Thursday morning in her office, which was the rented Airbnb. Therefore, Even if she had met him through dating apps, we don't know if this man made up a story about wanting her design services to get her to go to that place. Obviously, this is just my speculation, but I think it makes much more sense than the escort work that we just mentioned, which was talked about so much in the media and on social networks. The statements from the neighbors about that day became confusing. Some reported hearing music and later arguments in the apartment, while others claimed they didn't hear anything.
Nothing.
Now, the recordings told part of the story as well.
This visitor moved sheets to the building's laundry area.
He was also seen taking out trash bags and using the elevator repeatedly. For the investigators, this was evidence of why the Airbnb was so clean. The most revealing moment was recorded shortly before his final departure. A member of the building's cleaning staff. She saw him leave the apartment carrying a black plastic bag from which a red liquid was dripping. And when he realized he was being watched, this man quickly cleaned the hallway floor, entered the elevator, and then left the building. Now then, there was a problem with this visitor. The name he had signed with at the building's reception was not his real name. And he did this, as the prosecution later concluded, precisely to make it harder to identify him if something went wrong. What he didn't account for was everything else. Because between the building's security camera recordings, the entry and exit logs that the management handed over in full to the authorities, and the immigration records, the authorities managed to identify him by his full name in a very short time. The suspect was a man named Matthew Ashley Foster Smith, a 46-year-old British citizen from Poole in Dorset County, England. When investigating his profile and coordinating information with international agencies, the authorities discovered not only that he was a foreigner, but also a highly dangerous man. On the dating platforms he frequented, Matthew presented himself as a cosmopolitan and successful doctor, passionate about music and a frequent traveler. And although the profession was real, there was a part he was very careful not to reveal. Years ago, he had lost the right to practice medicine in the United Kingdom. The image he projected was, deep down, just a facade to appear high status and earn the trust of any of his potential professors. That's why I say this part makes much more sense than what was mentioned about being an escort.
I also want to say that we're talking about possible other victims, because even though no other homicide records are known yet, Matthew was not a stranger to the British criminal justice system.
In June 2020, he had been arrested and later sentenced to 18 months in prison for systematically stalking an ex-girlfriend. He had persistently sent her messages. He had called her and also sent her emails, using fake accounts to harass her and posting intimate photos of the victim on social media and websites without her consent. He ended up admitting that he had violated a restraining order, and it was precisely that conviction that cost him the right to practice his profession. A chilling detail of that first case is that the person who reported him was one of his own friends. Matthew had been sending messages to people close to him, saying that he intended to get an axe and destroy women.
In addition to other revealing phrases where he stated, "If I'm going to end up beaten, let it be worth it."
As soon as he regained his freedom, Matthew reoffended. In 2023, a second case was opened against him for harassing another woman. He followed her to the gym and waited for her outside her workplace. For those actions, he was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison. He was released on parole from a UK prison in January 2026 after serving part of that second sentence behind bars. At this point, Matthew Foster already posed an extreme danger to any woman around him, and the British authorities knew this perfectly well. In fact, in January 2026, the British police managed to get the pool court in that city to impose a stalking prevention order on him when he was released from prison. A civil court order in the United Kingdom designed to quickly protect victims of obsessive stalking. A measure that required him to report any change of address, restricted his use of electronic devices,
required him to report periodically to the police, and prohibited him from leaving the country. Restrictions that, unfortunately,
he ended up completely bypassing them in order to travel to South America.
By March 2026, Matthew was already in Bogota, and the investigation revealed that, long before he crossed paths with Natalia, this man had already done the same kind of thing in Colombia. During those months, he moved between apartments rented by the day and hostels in the historic center.
In one of those accommodations, he shared a room with a U.S. citizen identified as Cameron Gregory,
who later told authorities that during his stay with the Brit,
he suffered from unexplained lethargy, episode of sleep lasting more than 15 hours, and a disorientation he couldn't explain. And when he woke up, he would wake up with severe pain in his private parts. It was that same witness who described living with Matthew. He said that he would spend the whole day browsing women's profiles on dating apps, and the way he talked about them was pure hatred, treating them like objects and referring to their physical appearance. He used vulgar and disrespectful language. And this has a name. In the United States, there's a lot of talk about incels. The incels, who are the kind of men who deeply hate women,
being heterosexual,
and who usually consume this kind of content through social media. Someday we're going to make a list of cases involving incels who ended up killing. The report about what happened with Cameron Gregory was filed with the Bogota Secretariat of Security, but at the time, no one managed to link that case to Matthew in time. That means that when Matthew knocked on the door of apartment 702, he had already left a trail of warnings in 2 countries, and none of those warnings arrived in time. But let's go back to Thursday, June 18th. According to the reconstruction presented by the prosecutor's office later, Matthew entered the apartment at 10:33 in the morning and waited to make sure that Natalia was completely alone. And once they were alone, he attacked her with multiple blows to the head, delivered with a blunt object, until he killed her. Afterwards, thanks to the security cameras, it was confirmed that he had stayed inside the apartment for about 3 hours. During that time, he put the body inside the gray suitcase. He dragged it to the bathroom, placed it under the shower, and turned on the water. According to the prosecutor's office, this is where his medical training played a key role, because he knew exactly what that constant stream of water would do to the body and also to the work of the forensic experts. Meanwhile, he focused on cleaning the traces of blood that had been left in the apartment. Before leaving, he completely changed his clothes.
He put the clothes he was wearing into a bag and threw them down the building's garbage chute, trying to make it harder for the security cameras to identify him.
He also took Natalia's cell phone, according to the prosecutor's office, to prevent the connection between the two from being established. And at 1:23 in the afternoon, he left the apartment dragging that black bag that was dripping down the hallway. Outdoor cameras in the area. They tracked his movements as soon as he left the building. It was learned that she walked a few blocks and got into a ride-sharing vehicle, like Uber or a similar app. According to the reconstruction by the prosecutor's office, that same afternoon he stopped by an Icelandic bar, walked around a shopping mall, and returned to his hotel as if nothing had happened. From that point on, Matthew focused on buying time, and here's a detail. which is particularly striking because it seems that Matthew had been laying the groundwork for weeks. On May 31, 2026, that is 18 days before Natalia's death,
this British man had already written a series of desperate messages to his bank in the United Kingdom, claiming that in Colombia he had been drugged, beaten, and kidnapped.
in those same messages, he even told them that he had seen someone being murdered. For the investigators, that kidnapping story was part of a strategy that Matthew had been building to justify his movements and the delays in paying for his accommodations. An alibi prepared weeks in advance that would later come in very handy for him. After committing the crime, Matthew reinforced the deception with a second move. He sent a photograph of himself to a British media outlet,
Sitting in a bar in Bogota, eating a hamburger and drinking a soda while watching the World Cup match between England and Croatia on television. His version was that at the time of the crime, he was in a public place, calmly watching soccer, and therefore he couldn't have been in the apartment.
The problem with that alibi was that the timing didn't match. The England game was played at 3 in the afternoon, Bogota time, on Wednesday, June 17th, that is, the day before the crime. The authorities maintain that the assault happened on Thursday the 18th around midday. So the photo could be perfectly authentic and still not prove absolutely anything. The forensic computer experts focused on verifying the time and the metadata of the image precisely to show that it didn't match the time of death window, taking advantage of the fact that the victim's body was still hidden behind the closed door of that bathroom and that the authorities still didn't know anything about what had happened. Matthew fled by land on June 20, just 2 days after the crime. He traveled to the south of the country and crossed the border into Ecuador via the Rumichaca International Bridge. Once in Ecuadorian territory, he continued his journey to the capital, to Quito. At this point in the story, Matthew Foster was several days ahead of an investigation that hadn't even started yet. He had a minimally convincing alibi and was more than 1,000 kilometers away from the crime scene, on the other side of the border in a neighboring country. However, his luck was about to run out. The discovery of Natalia's body caused a huge media impact, an impact so big that it helped push the investigation forward. When it was confirmed that it was a violent death and that the main suspect had left the city days earlier, the prosecutor's office immediately activated the judicial cooperation protocols. Interpol issued a priority red notice with an international arrest warrant against Matthew Foster Smith, who by that time had already been identified. That was how, thanks to the cooperation of 3 countries, the Dorset police in the United Kingdom and Interpol managed to track Matthew's movements through calls made at the Quito airport. Finally, on June 27, 2026, 5 days after Natalia's body was found, the hunt came to an end. Agents from Interpol and the National Police of Ecuador carried out an operation at the airport terminal in the Ecuadorian capital, and they intercepted the suspect just as he was in the boarding area, about to leave the country, ready to board this flight to Europe. The British man did not offer any physical resistance, but among his belongings, the authorities found crucial evidence. He was carrying his 2 passports, the British one and also an American passport. He also had several credit cards in his name, and most importantly, he had the victim's cell phone, which he had tried to reset without success. 2 days later, on June 28th, he was formally deported to Colombia under a strict security scheme.
And once in Bogota, he was taken to the CTI holding cells to immediately begin the preliminary hearings before a judge overseeing the preliminary hearings.
He did not offer any resistance, but his The judicial process formally began on July 1, 2026. During the charging hearing, the prosecutor's office presented a devastating chronological account supported by evidentiary, technical, and testimonial material, bringing two main charges against the Briton: aggravated femicide and concealment, portion or destruction of physical evidence.
Matthew did not accept either of the two charges. So, to support the preventive detention measure, the prosecutor's office presented an arsenal of evidence. The forensic medical examinations confirmed that the cause of death of Natalia Villalba was blunt force polytrauma to the head, caused by repeated blows to the head.
Regarding the weapon, the prosecutor's office's hypothesis is that the blows were inflicted with an asimilar object to a kitchen utensil found inside the same apartment. And yes, the prosecutor's office has confirmed that the blows were inflicted with an object of similar characteristics. The digital lock of the apartment showed similar evidence. The prosecutor's office of similar characteristics. The crime. The door was only opened using the card assigned exclusively to the Briton, demonstrating that the time when Natalia lost her life and the moment when Foster opened the door fit perfectly. Afterwards, they had more evidence. The photo from the bar, the messages to the prosecutor's office, confirming the characteristics, the witnesses who saw him, like the building employees. They also had the record from the United Kingdom with his harassment cases. Matthew's defense tried to undermine the process, claiming that their client was innocent, that he had supposedly been the victim of a network. He has confirmed that the network drugged and kidnapped him. And did they go? The crime scene in the bathroom was contaminated. Due to the continuous flow, it was confirmed that they would grant him parole or house arrest while the trial was ongoing, but the pre-trial judge dismissed the defense's arguments. También el riesgo extremo. He was sent to a maximum security prison, ordering his immediate transfer to a penitentiary while the prosecution set the charges. El juicio oral donde podría. It was confirmed that the 40 blows inflicted were similar.
The case of Natalia Villalba Angarita shocked all of Colombia, a particularly painful case because what happened could have been avoided.
Matthew Foster's dangerous behavior had already been detected years earlier. He had already been tried, he had already been convicted twice, and there was already a court order expressly forbidding him from leaving the United Kingdom. And even so, this man took a plane, crossed half the world, and ended up committing a heinous crime in Bogota. That's it for today's case. Even so, he took a plane, crossed over, and ended up committing a heinous crime in Bogota.